Elias laughed, recounting his trip. "My empire runs itself." Clara, the housekeeper, smiled thinly, but a small voice from upstairs froze his laughter forever. The polished mahogany door of his penthouse apartment swung inward with a soft click, a sound that usually heralded his triumphant return from yet another lucrative business venture abroad. Elias stood on the threshold, a man sculpted by ambition and success. His expensive suit still crisp from the long flight, his mind already calculating the next global conquest. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips, a rare expression for a man whose life had become a monument to achievement rather than a sanctuary for joy since the profound loss of his beloved wife during childbirth. He expected the usual quiet efficiency of Clara, the housekeeper, perhaps the gentle hum of children's laughter echoing from the nursery, but instead an unsettling stillness permeated the vast, opulent space, a silence that felt heavier than the weight of his own weary solitude. The air, usually filled with the scent of fresh flowers and infant powder, carried only a faint, cloying sweetness, like forgotten fruit. He shrugged off his tailored jacket, tossing it carelessly onto a silky upholstered chaise lounge, his gaze sweeping across the impeccably maintained living area. The gleaming surfaces reflected the city lights outside, a cold, indifferent glow that mirrored the emotional landscape he often inhabited. He called out, his voice resonating slightly in the cavernous rooms. "Clara." "Lily? Lilo?" No immediate response came, only the soft whir of the central air conditioning. A flicker of annoyance, quickly replaced by a vague sense of unease, stirred within him. This was uncharacteristic. Clara, always so prompt, so seemingly devoted to the smooth running of his household, was never out of earshot when he was expected. His brow furrowed as he noticed a faint, almost imperceptible smudge on the pristine, white marble floor near the kitchen entrance, a detail he would normally overlook, but which now snagged at his tired mind, an incongruity in an otherwise perfect tableau. As he moved deeper into the apartment, a soft, whimpering sound drifted down from the upper floor, barely audible but distinct enough to send a shiver down his spine. It was not the playful cry of a child seeking attention, nor the robust wail of an infant needing a change. This was a fragile, broken sound, laced with a vulnerability that pierced through the carefully constructed armor around his heart. He quickened his pace, that unease crystallizing into a tightening knot in his stomach. He saw Clara then, emerging from the shadows of the hallway leading to the children's rooms, her uniform pristine, her hair neatly pinned, a placid, almost apologetic expression on her face. She offered a small, deferential bow, her eyes, usually so sharp and observant, seeming to avoid his direct gaze. "Oh, Mr. Thorne," she murmured, her voice soft as velvet, "I didn't hear you come in. The children are just settling down for their nap." But the whimpering continued, growing slightly louder, carrying a fragile plea that tugged relentlessly at Elias's paternal instincts he had long suppressed beneath layers of work and grief. He looked past Clara, his eyes narrowing as he tried to pinpoint the source of the sound. It seemed to emanate from Lily's room, a place that should have been filled with storybooks and laughter. He felt a sudden, inexplicable surge of protectiveness, a feeling so potent it almost buckled his knees. Clara stepped forward, her hand gently resting on his arm, a gesture meant to soothe, but which only intensified his growing suspicion. "Everything is fine, sir," she insisted, her grip surprisingly firm. They had a busy morning. "Perhaps you should rest after your long journey." Ignoring her, Elias strode past her, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The door to Lily's room was slightly ajar, revealing a sliver of darkness within. The whimpering was clearer now, punctuated by ragged breaths. He pushed the door open fully, and the sight that greeted him stole the air from his lungs. His 6-year-old daughter, Lily, usually so vibrant and full of life, was huddled in the far corner of her room, her small frame trembling, her face streaked with tears and dirt, her eyes wide with a terror that clawed at Elias's soul. Her small hand, bony and pale, reached out towards an empty plate on the floor. Her voice barely a whisper, a broken plea that shattered the silence of the room, and Elias's meticulously ordered "World, please. I'm so hungry, Papa," she cried, her voice cracking. "Don't let her hurt us anymore." Elias felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a terror far more potent than any boardroom negotiation or market crash could ever inspire. He knelt, his expensive suit forgotten, his eyes fixed on Lily's small, tear-stained face, her words echoing in the sudden, cavernous silence of the room. A profound, searing guilt twisted in his gut, a realization that his relentless pursuit of success, his emotional retreat into the sterile world of finance after his wife's tragic departure during Leo's birth, had left his precious children vulnerable. His mansion, a monument to his achievements, had indeed become a mausoleum for his own emotions, a place where he had failed to notice the subtle cracks appearing in the lives of the two beings who mattered most. He reached out, his hand trembling as he gently touched Lily's arm, feeling the unsettling prominence of her small bones beneath the thin fabric of her nightgown, a stark contrast to the healthy, vibrant child he remembered leaving just weeks ago. The image of his innate wife, her radiant smile and boundless love, flashed through his mind, a silent accusation. Clara, her placid mask momentarily faltering, quickly composed herself, stepping forward with an air of practiced concern. "Oh, darling Lily, what a nightmare you must have had," she cooed, her voice saccharine sweet, attempting to pull the child into an embrace. Elias instinctively shielded Lily with his body, a primal roar of protectiveness stirring within him, a feeling he hadn't known he possessed since the day his wife had passed, taking with her a piece of his very soul. He looked at Clara, truly looked at her for the first time, seeing past the impeccable uniform and the deferential posture. Her eyes, usually so demure, now held a flicker of something unsettling, a cold, calculating glint that sent a fresh wave of alarm through him. He saw the slight tightenings of her jaw, the barely perceptible tremor in her hand as she retreated, a quiet fury simmering beneath her composed exterior. He scooped Lily into his arms, her tiny body alarmingly light, and held her close, burying his face in her hair, inhaling the faint, sweet scent of her, tinged now with something else, a faint, unwashed smell that pricked at his senses. He murmured soothing words, his voice rough with emotion, his heart aching with a pain far deeper than any he had known before. Lily clung to him, her small hands clutching his shirt, her trembling slowly subsiding as she buried her face in his shoulder. He felt a sudden, urgent need to check on Leo, his infant son, who was usually a beacon of gurgling joy, but had remained eerily silent throughout this horrifying discovery. He carried Lily, still sobbing softly, towards the adjacent nursery, his eyes scanning the hallway for any further signs of distress. The nursery, unlike Lily's room, seemed meticulously ordered, almost sterile. Baby Leo lay in his crib, a tiny, almost doll-like figure, his eyes wide and unblinking, staring up at the mobile above him without the usual infant curiosity. There was no robust cry, no playful kicking of his tiny legs. He was simply still. Elias gently laid Lily down on the plush rug and approached the crib, his heart clenching with each step. He reached in, his fingers brushing Leo's cheek, feeling the slight coolness of his skin, the delicate weight of his tiny body. Leo was underweight, his ribs faintly visible beneath his soft skin, a stark contrast to the chubby, thriving infant he had seen in the photos Clara had regularly sent him during his travels. The nanny had always assured him that both children were flourishing, sending carefully curated pictures that showed smiling faces, healthy meals, and idyllic playtimes. The deception, now laid bare, was a cruel, calculated blow. Clara, having followed him into the nursery, began to speak, her voice a low, insistent hum, attempting to weave a narrative of innocence and misunderstanding. "Oh, Mr. Thorne, the poor dear must have had a terrible dream," she insisted, her hands fluttering dismissively. "Children are so imaginative at this age. And Leo, he's just a quiet baby. Always has been. He's perfectly healthy, a bit small perhaps, but the doctor said he's thriving." She gestured vaguely towards a corner, where a stack of medical reports lay neatly piled, an illusion of diligence designed to deflect suspicion. Elias barely heard her, his gaze fixed on his children, a fierce, protective fire now burning in his chest, melting the ice that had encased his heart for so long. The emptiness he had felt since his wife's passing had been filled not with despair, but with a terrifying, potent resolve. He knew, with an absolute certainty that rattled him to his core, that something was profoundly wrong, and that Clara, with her carefully constructed facade of devotion, was at the heart of it. He would not rest until he had uncovered every hidden cruelty, every manipulation, and ensured his children's safety, even if it meant tearing down the very foundations of his carefully built world. He would become the father they deserved, no matter the cost. A raw, guttural sound escaped Ilias's throat, a sound he hadn't known he possessed, stripping away the veneer of the composed businessman. He straightened, his gaze piercing Clara's seemingly calm demeanor, seeing beyond the carefully constructed facade. His voice, usually measured and authoritative in boardrooms, was now laced with an icy fury that vibrated through the silent nursery. "Clara, you will step away from my children," he commanded, his words clipped, each syllable a hammer blow against her feigned innocence. He could see a fleeting flicker of something in her eyes, a spark of defiance quickly masked by a practiced subservience, but it was enough. The illusion of her unwavering dedication had shattered, revealing a colder, more calculating core beneath. He gently placed Lily back onto the rug, her small hand immediately seeking his, clinging to him like a lifeline, while his eyes never left Clara. He informed her that he required her immediate absence from the children's direct care, stating that he needed time to understand the bewildering situation that had unfolded before him, and that she would confine herself to her quarters until he had made a definitive decision about her future employment. Clara's lips thinned almost imperceptibly, a subtle tightening around her mouth that betrayed her inner turmoil, even as she managed a sorrowful sigh. "Oh, Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice dripping with an injured innocence, "I am truly heartbroken that you would think such things. I have dedicated years of my life to this family, to these precious children, especially after their mother's tragic departure." She wrung her hands, a picture of wounded loyalty, her eyes welling with convenient tears that never quite spilled over. "It is simply a misunderstanding, a child's vivid imagination after a bad dream." She glanced at Lily, a look that was meant to convey sympathy but held a chilling edge, a silent warning that Elias did not miss. She then turned her attention back to Elias, her tone shifting slightly, a subtle hint of resentment creeping in. "Perhaps, sir, your long absences have made you forget the delicate nature of children. Or perhaps you are simply overwhelmed by grief, seeing shadows where there are none. The insinuation, a cruel jab at his most profound vulnerability, only strengthened his resolve. As Clara, with a final, aggrieved sniff, retreated from the nursery, Elias felt a wave of nausea wash over him, swiftly followed by a surge of overwhelming guilt. He looked at Lily, her small body still trembling, her eyes wide and haunted, then at Leo, so unnaturally quiet and still. The stark reality of his emotional absence, his immersion in the world of endless work as a shield against the crushing pain of his wife's passing, now presented itself in the fragile forms of his children. He had sought solace in the relentless pursuit of wealth, believing that providing a lavish life was enough, that Clara's meticulous care negated the need for his constant presence. Now he saw the devastating cost of that self-deception. His grief had made him blind, his success a gilded cage for his family. He scooped Lily back into his arms, holding her tightly, murmuring promises he intended to keep, vows of protection, an unwavering presence that tasted like ashes in his mouth for all the years he had unknowingly denied them. He settled Lily gently on the large, comfortable bed in his own master suite, a space that had felt sterile and empty since his wife's departure, but which now held the fragile hope of a new beginning. He brought Leo's crib into the same room, placing it beside the bed, needing to keep both his children within sight, needing to feel their proximity as a balm to his wounded soul. He spent hours simply observing them, a silent vigil that was both heartbreaking and illuminating. Lily, though slowly calming in his embrace, flinched whenever he moved too quickly, her small hands instinctively rising to protect her face, a heartbreaking learned response that screamed of repeated fear. She ate with a ravenous hunger he had never witnessed, devouring the simple, nourishing food he prepared with a desperate haste that brought tears to his eyes, as if each mouthful might be her last. Leo, too, showed signs of neglect. His cries were weak, his movements lethargic, and he seemed to lack the robust curiosity of a thriving infant. His gaze often vacant, fixed on nothing in particular. Elias, his mind racing with 1,000 questions, began his investigation with a quiet, methodical intensity. He started in the kitchen, meticulously checking the pantry and refrigerator. He found an abundance of gourmet foods, expensive ingredients, but noticed a distinct lack of child-friendly staples, or any significant quantities of formula for Leo. The children's usual snacks were nowhere to be found, replaced by things that would be appealing to an adult or easily hidden. He then moved to Clara's room, a space he had never before considered entering, but now felt compelled to explore. He found stacks of expensive clothing, far beyond what her salary could afford, and a collection of designer accessories that hinted at a lifestyle she certainly wasn't earning. A small, locked journal lay hidden beneath a pile of scarves, its cover worn, its secrets waiting to be unearthed. The pieces of the puzzle, once invisible, were beginning to emerge from the shadows, each one a chilling testament to Clara's calculated cruelty and deep-seated resentment. He remembered then a fleeting thought, a casual comment his late wife had made about a collection of old letters, kept in a small, ornate box in her study, letters she had promised to show him one day, filled with her observations and thoughts about their life and future. A cold certainty settled in his heart. He knew where to look next. He moved with quiet urgency towards his late wife's study, a room filled with poignant memories and the lingering scent of her favorite jasmine, a space he had rarely entered since her departure. The ornate wooden box sat on her polished desk, exactly as he remembered, nestled amongst half-finished novels and delicate porcelain figurines. His fingers, usually so steady when navigating complex financial documents, trembled as he opened it, revealing bundles of neatly tied letters. He recognized his wife's elegant handwriting. His fingers, usually so steady when navigating complex financial documents, trembled as he opened it, revealing bundles of neatly tied letters. He recognized his wife's elegant handwriting instantly. A wave of poignant memories washing over him, a bittersweet ache in his chest. As he began to read, the words on the aged paper transported him back to a time when joy was a constant companion, when his world was illuminated by her vibrant spirit. Her early letters spoke of the simple happiness of their growing family, of Lily's first steps, of the anticipation of Leo's arrival. But as he delved deeper, a subtle shift in tone became apparent, a thread of unease woven into the fabric of her cheerful narratives. She wrote of Clara, initially with praise for her efficiency, but then with a growing, almost imperceptible apprehension. One letter, dated just months before her passing, caught his breath. "My dearest Elias," she had penned, her usual flourish now slightly hesitant. "I find myself troubled by Clara. She is, of course, incredibly capable, but there's a coldness in her eyes sometimes, a flicker of something I cannot quite place. I've noticed small things, trivial perhaps, but they prick at my intuition. A missing heirloom, a slight discrepancy in the household accounts I keep, easily dismissed, yet they linger. She seems overly interested in our finances, in your travel schedule, in details that feel personal. And Lily, my sweet Lily, has begun to cling to me more, whispering of bad dreams, of a quiet fear she cannot articulate. I worry, my love, that my illness has made me overly sensitive, but a mother's instinct is a powerful thing. There's a shadow here, Elias, a quiet presence that feels less like help and more like observation." Elias's heart pounded, each word a hammer blow, revealing the painful truth of his wife's unspoken fears, fears he had been too consumed by his own grief and ambition to acknowledge. He saw now how Clara had preyed on his wife's vulnerability, on her declining health, systematically isolating her, sowing seeds of doubt and fear. Driven by a renewed, burning resolve, Elias expanded his investigation, the letters a chilling roadmap to Clara's hidden transgressions. He meticulously reviewed bank statements, cross-referencing them with household expenditures. What he uncovered sent a cold shock through him. Significant sums, disguised as legitimate expenses, had been siphoned off over the past year, subtle but consistent withdrawals that Clara had expertly masked. He found forged invoices for services never rendered, inflated prices for supplies, and even a series of small, recurring transfers to an offshore account, all signed with what appeared to be his own signature, cleverly replicated. The depth of her calculated deception was staggering, far beyond simple greed. It spoke of a methodical, long-term plan to exploit his wealth and, perhaps, his grief-stricken absence. He also discovered that his wife's small personal trust fund, meant for the children's education, had been subtly manipulated, its value diminishing far more rapidly than any legitimate expenses could explain. Clara had been systematically bleeding them dry, not just of their comfort, but of their future. In the quiet hours of the night, while Clara believed him asleep, Elias became a silent sentinel. He observed her movements, noting the furtive glances she cast at his office, the way she lingered near the safe, her hands sometimes reaching out, then retracting. One night, he heard soft footsteps leading to Lily's room. He followed, his heart in his throat, and watched through a barely opened door as Clara stood over Lily's sleeping form. Her face a mask of cold resentment, her lips moving in silent, venomous whispers. Elias couldn't make out the words, but the sheer malevolence in her posture, the cruel set of her jaw, was enough to confirm his darkest suspicions. He realized then that Clara's motive extended beyond mere financial gain. It was fueled by a deep-seated bitterness, a corrosive envy for the life Elias and his children possessed. A life she felt she was entitled to, or perhaps a life she believed she had been denied. He knew now that her manipulations were not just about money, but about power, about control, about inflicting pain on those who had what she coveted. Amidst this horrifying unraveling, Elias poured his heart into reconnecting with his children. He spent every waking moment with Lily and Leo, his corporate empire temporarily forgotten, replaced by the urgent, tender demands of fatherhood. He read to Lily for hours, his voice a soothing balm, watching as the terror slowly receded from her eyes, replaced by tentative glimmers of trust. She began to whisper small fragments of her ordeal, not graphic details, but enough to paint a devastating picture. The hunger, the loneliness, the fear of Clara's unpredictable moods, the way she would lock them in their rooms for hours, telling them their papa didn't love them, that he had forgotten them. Each revelation was a fresh wound to Elias's soul, a testament to his catastrophic failure to protect them, yet it also fueled his determination. Leo, too, began to respond, his small body slowly gaining weight, his eyes losing their vacant stare, now following Elias's movements, a tiny smile occasionally gracing his lips. Elias found himself overwhelmed by a love so profound, so fierce, it consumed him, melting away the last vestiges of his grief-induced emotional numbness. He was no longer just a successful businessman. He was a father, finally, fully present, his heart irrevocably bound to these two precious lives. He knew the fight ahead would be arduous, but with his children's fragile trust in his hands, he was ready to face any adversary, to uncover every last truth, and to ensure that justice, in its purest form, would prevail. Elias knew that the time for quiet investigation was over. The truth, however painful, had to be brought into the light, not just for his children's sake, but for every child who might suffer in silence. He meticulously compiled every piece of evidence, each item a shard of shattered trust and a testament to Clara's calculated malice. The financial discrepancies, carefully cross-referenced bank statements, and forged invoices formed an irrefutable paper trail of her greed. He had taken countless photographs of Lily's gaunt frame and Leo's lethargy, images that spoke volumes of their suffering, stark contrast to the doctored photos Clara had sent him during his travels. Most damning of all were his wife's letters, her premonitions now chillingly accurate, her words a beacon of truth from beyond the veil, revealing Clara's insidious manipulation even before Elias had seen it. He also sought out a trusted family lawyer, a woman known for her fierce advocacy for children, confiding in her the horrifying saga that had unfolded in his own home. He explained everything, his voice raw with regret and resolve, presenting the evidence with a precision that belied the emotional turmoil raging within him. The formal confrontation unfolded not in a grand courtroom, but in the hushed, sterile environment of a Child Protective Services office, a setting chosen to minimize further trauma to Lily. Elias sat beside his daughter, his hand a constant, reassuring presence on her small back, feeling the tremor of her fear, but also the burgeoning strength of her trust in him. Across the table sat Clara, her face a mask of indignation, flanked by a public defender who seemed already overwhelmed by the weight of the evidence against his client. The air in the room was thick with unspoken accusations and the heavy scent of disinfectant, a stark contrast to the opulence of Elias's home, yet here true justice felt closer, more tangible. Lily, her voice a fragile whisper at first, began to recount her experiences, her small words painting a devastating picture of hunger, isolation, and the chilling coldness of Clara's gaze. She spoke of how Clara would sometimes withhold food, telling her that good girls ate everything, but that she was a bad girl, not deserving of a full plate, and that Papa was too busy to care. She described the long hours locked in her room, the silence broken only by her own frightened sobs, and the way Clara would tell her that her mother had left because she didn't want a naughty child. Elias felt each word pierce his heart, a fresh wave of guilt washing over him, but also a renewed surge of fierce love and unwavering determination. As Lily's testimony continued, gaining a fragile momentum, Elias presented the physical evidence, the financial records projected onto a screen, showing Clara's systematic theft and manipulation of his assets and his late wife's trust. He displayed the photographs of his children side by side with Clara's carefully curated, deceptive images, the stark difference, a silent, powerful indictment of her cruelty. The caseworker, a woman with kind eyes but a steely resolve, listened with growing horror, taking meticulous notes. Clara, initially maintaining her facade of injured innocence, began to crack under the relentless weight of the truth. Her eyes, which had been downcast in feigned sorrow, now darted nervously, a desperate glint of fear mixing with a simmering rage. She interrupted Lily's testimony with sharp, indignant protests, calling his daughter a liar, an imaginative child, fabricating stories for attention, attempting to paint Elias as an unstable, grief-stricken father whose accusations stemmed from his own emotional fragility. Her voice, once soft and subservient, now rose in a shrill crescendo, her composure completely unraveling. She pounded her fist on the table, her carefully constructed mask shattering into 1,000 pieces, revealing the bitter resentment that had festered beneath. "You think you're so special, Mr. Thorne," she shrieked, her eyes blazing with an unholy fire. "You, with your perfect life, your endless money, your beautiful wife, who just left you with these burdens. You think you deserved all of it, while I worked my fingers to the bone, watching you live a life of ease." She spat out her words, each one laced with venom, confessing in her outburst the depths of her envy and her twisted belief that she was somehow entitled to what Elias possessed. She admitted, not outright, but through her furious accusations, that she had starved the children, not just for money, but to assert control, to make them suffer as she felt she had suffered, to diminish Elias's perfect world. The room fell silent, save for Clara's ragged breathing. Her outburst, a horrifying confirmation of everything Elias had suspected, a raw, unfiltered outpouring of her malevolent heart. Lily, startled by the sudden explosion, buried her face in Elias's side. But he held her close, his gaze unwavering, a silent promise of protection radiating from him. The truth, ugly and painful, had finally been laid bare. Clara's furious confession, though terrifying, solidified the case against her. The caseworker, her expression now grim and resolute, ensured that the full force of the law was brought to bear. The subsequent legal proceedings, swift and decisive, culminated in Clara facing the consequences of her profound cruelty and calculated deceit. Justice, though a long and painful road, was ultimately served, ensuring that her malevolence could no longer touch innocent lives. Elias watched as the woman who had once moved through his home like a shadow now departed it forever, stripped of her false piety and exposed for the darkness she harbored. The relief that washed over him was immense, but it was overshadowed by the deep understanding that the real work of healing, of rebuilding, was just beginning. He looked at Lily, her small hand still clutching his, and knew that his journey as a father had truly just started. 2 years unfolded like gentle petals after a storm, bringing with them the tender shoots of recovery and the vibrant bloom of a family reborn. The grand house, once a silent monument to Elias's grief and absence, now hummed with the joyful cacophony of childhood. Lily, no longer a phantom of fear and hunger, was a bright, blossoming 8-year-old, her laughter echoing through the sunlit rooms as she chased her younger brother Leo through the sprawling garden. Her eyes, once shadowed with an unspeakable sadness, now sparkled with a mischievous light, reflecting the boundless love that surrounded her. She would often tell Elias, her small hand reaching for his, "Papa, I am not scared anymore. You came back." And Elias, his heart full to bursting, would simply pull her close, inhaling the sweet scent of her hair, marveling at the resilience of her spirit. Leo, now a sturdy, boisterous toddler, thrived under his father's unwavering gaze, his chubby cheeks dimpled with constant smiles, his babbling a joyous symphony in their home. Elias had shed the skin of the distant magnate, embracing his role as a father with a devotion that consumed his every waking moment. His business affairs were still managed with precision, but his priorities had irrevocably shifted. Mornings were spent making pancakes with Lily, afternoons reading stories on the sun-drenched patio, and evenings were for shared meals, filled with easy conversation and the comforting clinking of silverware. He taught Lily how to plant seeds in the garden, watching her delight as tiny green shoots emerged, a powerful metaphor for their own growth. He would hold Leo close, singing lullabies his own mother had sung to him, feeling the warmth of the child's breath against his neck, a tangible reminder of the precious present. The phantom of his late wife still lingered, a gentle, loving memory, but it no longer paralyzed him. Instead, her spirit felt like a guiding light, a silent blessing on the vibrant, loving home they had painstakingly rebuilt, bricked by emotional brick, with truth, courage, and an unconditional love that transcended all pain. He had learned that true wealth was not measured in assets, but in the laughter of his children, the warmth of their embrace, and the unbreakable bond of family. The story of Elias, Lily, and Leo is a testament to the enduring power of love in the face of unspeakable darkness. It reminds us that even when shadows loom large, the light of truth and the fierce embrace of family can conquer all. What would you do to protect a child's innocence? How far would you go to rebuild a shattered life? Share your thoughts and let this narrative be a reminder that every child deserves a home filled with safety, warmth, and unconditional love, and that justice, however slow, will always find its way to those who seek it with courage and an open heart.